This is a toy Stormtrooper helmet I colored in when I was about 12. It's definitely not perfect, some of the colors go in between the lines, and the color theory is pretty bad, but I think it still looks pretty cool. My grandparents gave it to me as a Christmas present. I remember being really into Star Wars Rebels at the time, so the color design was kind of inspired by Sabine. Recently I've been wanting to 3D print a life-size Stormtrooper helmet, but I wasn't sure how to make it unique, and then it hit me. I'll take the color scheme from this toy and apply that to the life-size Stormtrooper helmet. The first step was to find a 3D model that I like. I found this model here on Thingiverse, made by this user on screen. Next I have to scale the model up to fit my head. Getting the scale right is super important when 3D printing helmets. If you get it too small, then you can't wear them. And if you get them too big, then you end up looking like a bobblehead. There are many different ways to scale 3D printed helmets. In my case, I'm going to use a 3D model of my own head, which I can import in a person slicer, and then scale the Stormtrooper helmet accordingly. About 104.5% looks pretty good. Once I had the model scaled, I then split it into 3 pieces. I made sure the bottom piece was as small as possible just in case I had my scale off. This way I don't waste too much filament if I have to print it again. Now off to the printer. After I got the print off the printer, I did a test fit to be 100% sure that it would actually fit my head. And it fits! It's pretty tight, but that's perfect as I won't look like a bobblehead. Now back to the printer where I print the other 2 parts off. Once the other 2 parts were printed and off the printer, I glued everything together. Here I'm using my 3D printed pin to add some more filament where each piece meets. This will give the connection a bit more strength. Time to make the helmet look super smooth. First I'll start with sanding, and a lot of it. Luckily I do have an orbital sander, but it's too big to get into the small spot, so some hand sanding is required. I'm applying a coat of automotive filler primer. This will help close some of the smaller layer lines that I missed while sanding. After the filler primer had dried, it was time to coat the helmet in a mixture of UV resin and baby powder. Mixing these 2 materials together creates a thick paste that really helps smooth out your print. Once the mixture was all over the print and cured, it was back to sanding. There were still a few spots to fill in, so I added some more of the mixture and sanded that down off camera. Hopefully any other dents or layer lines will pass as battle damage. On to painting. I painted these 4 detail pieces first, which I printed off earlier. I start with some filler primer, the same I used for the main helmet, then painted the side pieces red and the round pieces black, finishing them both with a glossy clear coat. Now I'll set these parts aside onto the main helmet. I figured the hardest part of the mask to try and mask off would be the middle or red part of the helmet, so I sprayed that part first to avoid having to mask it off altogether. Masking the bottom off to paint the top green was next, but I took a minute to get the measurement of how large I wanted the rebellion logo to be. About 4.5 inches seems to be a good size. Once I acquired the measurement, I masked off the rest of the helmet and sprayed on the green. I then removed the masking tape and paper and touched up some of the areas of overspray. Most of what I touched up ended up being pointless because I touched up the parts that are going to be white anyway. The bottom of the helmet was next to paint, so I masked off the top of the helmet and sprayed the bottom with a black spray paint. After removing the acetate for the second time, I applied some touch-up paint, making sure to actually apply it in the correct spots this time. Next, I got to work hand painting on the white and black details. Once the hand painting was done, I again sealed the helmet with a glossy clear coat. While waiting for the helmet to dry, I cut out the stencil of the Rebellion logo. After taping the logo onto the top of the helmet, I sprayed the first part with red. While removing the stencil, I ended up ripping it, so I did have to cut out another one. I applied the new stencil and began to paint on the light blue part of the logo. This took ages because I used relatively cheap paint and it had very bad coverage. I think it took like 6 or 7 coats just to cover up most of the green. With the red and blue parts done, I moved on to outlining the logo in black. Now that the logo is completely finished, I sealed the entire helmet once more with a coat of glossy clear spray. The helmet is super close to being finished. In order to finish it, I just need to cut out the mesh for the mouthpieces and the reflective film for the eyes. I used some printer paper and a Sharpie to mark how large I needed to cut both the film and the mesh. I first tried cutting each eyepiece out separately, but it came out too small, so I ended up cutting out one large piece that goes in between both eyes. To secure both the film and the mesh, I used hot glue. And with that, my oddly colored Stormtrooper helmet is done. Thanks for watching the video. I'm trying to get a new prop build out every Monday, so if this is content you enjoy, please consider subscribing. Oh, and don't forget to like the video.